keep up with the allotted time, we will move on to session 2, which will dive into the challenges of applying replacement cost and the underlying case causes. So I will kindly invite Tran Chai, Social Development Specialist from the Sustainability and Fiduciary Solutions Department of AIIB, to lead this discussion, supported by insights from other AIIB colleagues. So Sue, with that, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ines, for introducing me. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Before going to the presentation, allow me to introduce our AIIB team. We have a big team to join the workshop. Let I open the camera so we can see the meeting room. We have 5 members to participate in the presentation and discussion. Ms. Pelumi Perez, she is our social consultant. Ms. Maya Gabriela Villaluz, she is Senior Environmental Specialist. She is a registered land and assets valuator. And Dr. Indrani, she is Senior Environmental Specialist. We also have a Pato Priya Ghosh, he is Senior Social Development Specialist. He's joining us online. Thank you. So now allow me to discuss about the key challenges with replacement costs. As we already discussed in the previous section on replacement costs principle involved with 5 elements and components, which are fair market value, transaction costs, interest accruals, transitional and restoration costs, and other applicable payment, if any. But in practice, at least from AIIB practice, 3 components: fair market value. Let I turn this off. This one. Transaction costs and transitional and restoration costs are mandatory. So it means during the valuation, valuator must values and then calculate the replacement cost for the interest accruals and other applicable payments. We consider these as optional or applicable when relevant. For the fair market value, from our experience, we have 7 challenges that we want to share with you today. The first one is with the lack of the comparable market data. In some cases, they know or insufficient comparable market data, or there is some information, but the information is from the not reliable or trusted sources. So there may be limited benchmarks or references to rely on. That's the first challenge is that I believe that all the evaluators face to very often. The second one is complex nature of the assets. We have land with multi-purposes of uses, the complex structure. And in the valuation that I have conducted, I had some businesses with very complex structure with multiple location and type of operation. So it really has to do the valuation. And then uncertain and dynamic markets. In the uncertain and dynamic markets, the price of the assets fluctuates due to various factors. For example, dynamics, and then the prices and also the economic condition. So we have to do a lot of adjustment time to time to ensure that it's adequate to replace the affected assets. And then structure development in the surrounding areas. in many cases, local people, because of the information on the infrastructure development in the surrounding area, that will be implemented or are being implemented. It impacts on the market value very much. So we evaluators have to do the adjustment to consider the development factor in calculating the price, and then for some intangible assets, for example, income and business, it really hard to conduct valuation because local people they are reluctant to tell about the income or the business, or it's hard to collect other relevant information. And then valuation requires a lot of adjustment, assumptions, and careful analysis. But in some countries, we don't have experience and expertise valuator to do the valuation. And then you may discuss in the next section, but in our experience, using different methods of calculating and evaluating the values of the assets may come with different valuation results. So then we can, in our experience, we have to discuss a lot with the stakeholder on the methodology we will adopt before conducting valuation. So this also the challenges. Okay, let me move on with the payment. As you know, the first challenge with the payments of the fair market value is the gap of time between calculation of development cost and the disbursement compensation. I have not yet seen any project the time gap is less than 3 months, normally like 6 months or even 1 year. Because after calculation, in some country you have to submit the calculation for reviewing and approval, and then to specify it in the resettlement plan. It requires some time to review and for approval, and then disclosure and other processes. And then once the disbursement actual happen, the fair market value is no longer fair market value. So this is the first one, and the second one is almost similar. So once the actual disbursement of compensation, the calculation or the value of the assets already changed. And then for costs for improvement of the lands, the valuator have to values the improvement of the land both in the affected area, because some people they have improved their land and now the land is affected, and then also the land in the relocation area, the new places when people move to. So with the first one, then it's very difficult to identify from when the land was improved and how much the cost actually invested on improvement. And for the relocation area, of course, AIIB also have a requirement, as a policy requirement, that we must have to consider the minimum community standard of quality and safety. But these standards, these community standards are different community by community. So how we can calculate, how we can determine the market value for that. And then some cultural assets is priceless. For example, some pagoda temple and some assets in the ethnic minorities. This is really challenging for us to identify the values of the assets. And then, of course, we have the difference in the perception of the affected people. They even have their own method to calculate and the value of the assets that are affected by the project. They have their own justification how the cost should be different, and it's normally they consider the values valuated by the valuator is lower than what it is the market values. And then the last one is issue with the salvage value. And in my career and in my valuation, I got this question very often: why the affected household are paid by the market value for the affected structure, but we have to provide to give away the existing structure and the tree for the local people, for the affected household. We already compensate for the affected household by market value. So why we have to give the structure and the tree, especially the trees, for the affected household for free? So we try to explain that, okay, we try to ensure that the people have at least the same or better living standard compared to before. So it would add some value for the affected household. But then I have another question. So who will do that? Who will demolish? Who will dismantle the structure or the tree? The household or the PMU or the executing agency or the implementing agency? If the household do that, there are some risks, especially for environmental issue like accident or some other issue. So this also the challenges that we should consider when doing the valuation. Then for the transaction cost, we have four challenges. The first is many costs. Cost for applying the land ownership certificates, cost for getting permission to reconstruct the houses, cost for the fee for environmental charge for demolition of the structure and other things. So in my valuation, for some time, I could not identify all the costs, so I have to do it again. Anyway, and there are some hidden costs and externalities. Hidden cost, for example, authorization cost, we don't know how much it should be. Externalities, like some costs go to the third party, but not for the affected household, how we define that. And then issue with the time, travel charges, labor, and other transaction cost, and also different party involved. So it takes time and it requires a lot of analysis. And then for the payment, various uses of the land and assets. For example, land, the house, come business or the shop. The house comes shops. So when you pay the transaction cost, it's not accurate for all the purposes. Maybe it's okay for living, but not okay for business. So we need a last discussion with the affected household and relevant agency. Administrative delays, compensation and relocation is also the issue. Because of the delay, the cost change, maybe because of the market change and other factors. And then as Ms. Zara already mentioned, tax implication of compensation is also the challenge. Is how to apply it is also the challenge. Transitional and restoration costs. We have at least five challenges. The first and the second one linked together. Various relocation option of the relocation household. As you may know, there are various options. Some relocate on site, some relocate to another places far or near to the affected household, and with different alternatives. Some with agricultural-based activities, some with non-agricultural activity. So how we can calculate or identify the the transitional and restoration costs for the affected household. It should be the same. It should not be the same for all the affected household, but with different categories. Like people who move far from the affected household should have a different assistance. People who move near to the affected household should be with different assistance, for example. So this takes a lot of time and a lot of it requires a lot of analysis. And then change from agricultural based livelihood to non-agricultural livelihood is a long-term traditional. It's long traditional time. So how to calculate it? It's a challenge for us. We can discuss how to solve with this issue later on. But I just list out the challenges that we are facing to now, and then identify and agree on time periods of income loss due to the project and income restoration. This always the challenge when I do valuation, because, for example, for two households, one move to another area and one relocates on site. So how many months we provide for the household on site? How many months we provide for the household who move 10 kilometers from the affected household? This kind of thing require a lot of discussion with the affected household and the relevant agency. As I mentioned in our AIIB policy, this is the new one in our policy. We require that the budget, especially with resettlement, we have to ensure acceptable minimum community standard of quality and safety. It means we have to discuss with the community about the community standard, and then we have to identify the cost, the restoration cost to have for the affected household and the community. But as I mentioned, the standards are different between community to community. So how we can do that? These also the challenges. Okay, with the payment, so some restoration cost payment are not directly to the affected household. For example, some costs go to the local authority because we need the local authority to grant the certificate for the land use, for example. So it goes to the third party, but people affected household, they don't agree. They say that they request this cost to be paid for the household, for example. And payment arrangement. If we work in Thailand, for example, the restoration cost is not paid until the people they move out of the affected household. So 30% for the affected household to move out, 70% after they already moved to the new area. It's very difficult to the household to manage the payment, and also some assistance or some restoration costs are paid after the activity have been done. For example, if the assistance for land improvement, for example, some government requests the improvement completed, and then they come to see, and then to check, and then to pay for the cost. So it's hard for the people to implement the activities. And then household change the activity and change the livelihood or cannot be found. Some households they move too far to the affected household, to another provinces, to another region. So it's very difficult for us to find and to discuss with them about the assistance. And then interest accrue. There are two issues. One is in the resettlement plan, maybe also include the resettlement plan for the IDB finance project, AIIB finance project, and also World Bank project. The payment schedule is indicative and tentative. So it's not the fixed time when the actual disbursement of compensation is. So we cannot apply, we cannot provide interest accrued. But in some countries, like in Vietnam, for example, if the detailed compensation plan have been approved and after some months, if compensation is not paid, then the interest following to the bank interest must be paid for the affected household. But in some countries, there is no provisions in the national law and regulation on this provision. So allow me to stop here, and then we still have a time for discussion about how to overcome, how to settle, how to deal with these challenges in the later section. So let me stop here, and if you have any question, we will join with NEB and NEB and AIIB to respond to you. Thank you. Back to you, Ines. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much for that comprehensive presentation. So I believe we have a quick question for the participants before we move on to your questions and answers. So please respond to these very quickly while I read out and group out the questions that you have prepared for us. So in today's session, we heard to discuss the intricacies of calculating replacement costs, highlighting the challenges of determining fair market value. And this is caused by several factors, including unpredictable markets, lack of data, complexity and hidden nature of transaction costs, and the variability in restoration costs depending on relocation and restoration options. Stu also noted the issues with accrued interest, particularly in regions without explicit provisions for its payments. So now some questions that I've captured from the previous session that are more about challenges than the basic terms, and also some questions that you asked during this particular session. So I've tried to group them into a couple of groups, compensation and valuation challenges. So how do you determine compensation for small apartments? What alternatives exist if they can't be replaced? What do you do about undervalued properties due to outdated rates? What is the source of information for assessing fair market value? And how do we handle land value appreciation, including speculative value post-development? And is there a time limit for the salvage value of a structure? How should we consider salvage value if the structure is very old or deteriorated? So these are about the compensation and valuation. And I leave it to you, Sue, Zara, Ben, and other colleagues from AIIB and NDB to pick up these questions. So this is about the compensation and valuation challenges.
Yes, it allows. I pick one question on the how to deal with the price or the value changes due to the gaps time between the replacement cost valuation and the actual compensation payment paid. In practice, with the ADB Finance Fejzic, if the time gap is more than 6 months, so normally we discuss with the government to apply some coefficient, some percentage for based on the like a inflation rate issued by the government, especially the Ministry of Finance. Then we add some percentage in to pay for the household. So that is a practice that we are doing.
Great. So if I pick up on the low rate issue, which I think we've seen in many countries. I've been privileged to work around the globe. That's often because there's a taxation issue, so people underdeclare numbers to try to avoid some taxation, and then those declarations get used for other purposes within ministries and sometimes end up in a valuation process. The valuer, if they're experienced in that country, should be understanding those challenges, and the process of identifying whether markets are actually happening informally around the formal numbers by the ministry is really important. So I've been working on some projects looking at the valuation of unregistered land, and these issues about how the valuer needs to at least report those challenges, even if they're not amended in the numbers, so that it's quite clear and transparent about what the valuer has done and how they've done it. So it's like telling a story from beginning to end in a valuation. You need to understand all the steps that have been taken and what assumptions and information has been used in that valuation. Then it becomes clear. So when you get two valuations which differ, you're not just looking at the numbers which are different, you're actually looking at why those numbers are different.
Allow me to answer the question on the archaeological site found during project construction. Basically, this is a very important issue, because what is the value of something that's old? Meaning not only old as in decades, maybe hundreds of years or thousands of years, and that's priceless. And that goes to the cultural value of how do we put money in terms of our history. And so what would be the best? First, we determine what is there, what cultural value is there. Is it movable or immovable? If it's movable, then best practice would be to inform the national agency, okay, on the presence of all these immovable, important property, cultural properties or assets. They will have to carefully document and then take them and put in a museum, or, you know, everything recorded properly. If it's immovable, go back and review the design of the project. Is it essential that the project is located there? However, there is also the option of alternative location. How far has the construction gone that maybe there could be a change in alignment if it's linear? Okay, if it's vertical, then it's only digging up, and maybe they can stop and move somewhere else. So that's very important, because here you say accidentally found. It is important government knows that it's there and they decide, will there be a change in the design? And if not, then what can be done to avoid that particular area? Because as we say, archaeological, very important, not only for the country, but internationally. And I think the best practice would be is just to hold, discuss, and see what would be the best option.
Thank you very much for that. So we have quite a few questions coming in, and I think I will leave some of these for day 3, but maybe just 1 or 2 more questions because we're already slightly behind time. So how accurate are current assessment tools in estimating transitional costs in low income and rural settings? And maybe one more, how should we compensate informal settlers, especially migrants or long-term users without land ownership? So please, colleagues, pick those 2 up, and then we will move on to the next session. But I'm documenting all these interesting questions that you have, and any that we don't answer today will be answered on day 3 or day 2, if it's the right time and place to answer. Thank you very much.
If I may join here, there are so many questions, and the questions are covering very different areas. So there are several blocks here. One are policy-related questions, like how we should compensate. What is the principle of compensation for this or that asset? And usually this is reflected in the entitlement metrics for eligible person and what this eligible person is eligible for. What will be the entitlement? Now, the second block of the questions are about valuation. How, when we have everything in the entitlement metrics, who is eligible for what type of approach, like non-titled users, how we should compensate them for structures, or what type of allowances should we have? Then second question is about valuation. How we need to value that unit rate that will help us to calculate the compensation of the benefit. And there are different questions in the chat about baseline data, how to use outdated, if data is outdated, what to do in that case, what alternatives could be used, etc. The third block of questions, and Sue in his presentation reflected very interesting the challenges with that, how to deliver that compensation, what could be lost on the way, how to organize that process to ensure that people are getting full replacement cost and also access to livelihood restoration. So this is third question, including salvageable materials. Should those be compensated or not? Should people take those salvageable materials, or this process should be organized by the implementing agency or contractor to do that? And I will try to, if we will have time, to share one case study on that later, on what problems we had in one of our projects and what we did related to salvageable materials. This is so policy, valuation, delivery of compensation, and last block of questions on livelihood restoration. Now we are collecting all the questions, and we will summarize those in that blocks. They were interesting questions on agricultural land valuation, and we will try to share with you a tool on what factors should be considered when you are valuing agricultural land. So please be a little bit patient. The topic is very hot, and questions are really come from different directions. So third day, please continue adding your questions. And third day, we will have a big panel and which will answer all the questions in a systematized way. I'm sorry for taking so much of the floor. And yeah, thank you. And not answering the question, basically.
No problem. So yes, I will occasionally pick out one or two that are interesting, but as Zara said, we will try to group them in these 4 key blocks and then respond to them on day 3, any ones that haven't been picked up right away.